The fluorescent lights of Romano's bistro flickered with their usual arrhythmic pulse, casting shadows that danced across the checkered floor like ghosts of better days. I wiped down table 7 for the 3rd time, my fingers raw from the chemical burn of cheap cleaning solution, the acrid smell mixing with the lingering scent of garlic and disappointment that seemed permanently embedded in the fabric of my uniform. My feet throbbed in shoes held together more by hope than stitching, each step a small negotiation with pain. It was nearly midnight on a Thursday, the kind of night when the city felt hollow, when even the usual buzz of traffic seemed muted, as if the world itself had grown tired of pretending. Rain hammered against the windows in sheets, transforming the street outside into a watercolor blur of neon and darkness. I should have been home 2 hours ago, but Marco, my manager with his perpetual coffee breath and wandering eyes, had called in sick, leaving me to close alone, again. The bell above the door chimed, and I didn't even look up at first. Just another late-night straggler seeking shelter from the storm, probably wanting coffee and nothing else, tipping in loose change if I was lucky. But then I smelled it. Not the usual mixture of wet pavement and cheap cologne that accompanied our typical patrons. This was different. Expensive leather, something dark and woody like cedar mixed with smoke, and underneath it all, the unmistakable metallic tang of blood. My head snapped up. The man who stood in the doorway didn't belong in Romano's bistro. He didn't belong in this neighborhood at all. Everything about him screamed money and danger in equal measure, from the charcoal suit that probably cost more than my yearly rent, now soaked and clinging to broad shoulders, to the Italian leather shoes that left wet impressions on our worn linoleum. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, rivulets of water. Or was it blood, tracing the sharp angles of his face? But it was his eyes that stopped my breath. Dark, almost black in the dim lighting, they swept the room with the kind of calculated awareness that made my survival instincts scream. This was a man who cataloged exits, who measured threats, who had seen things that left permanent marks on the soul. He was alone. Completely, strangely alone. And he was hurt. I saw it in the way he favored his left side, the slight catch in his breath, the paleness beneath his olive complexion. His right hand pressed against his ribs, and when he took a step forward, he stumbled. Just slightly. Just enough. "We're closed," I heard myself say, the words automatic, but my feet were already moving toward him. His gaze locked onto mine, and something electric passed between us. Recognition, though we'd never met. Assessment. A question I couldn't quite read. "Please." The word came out rough, barely above a whisper, but it carried weight. Authority, even in desperation. "I need—" He swayed, and instinct overrode every sensible thought screaming in my head. I lunged forward, catching him before he hit the ground, my small frame somehow bearing the weight of his considerable bulk as we crashed together against the nearest booth. Up close, he was overwhelming. All heat and hard muscle. The scent of expensive cologne mixing with sweat, and that persistent copper smell of blood. "Jesus, you're bleeding," I breathed, my hands already searching for the source. His white shirt, barely visible beneath the suit jacket, was dark with it, spreading like a map of violence across his torso. "Lock the door." His voice was clearer now, commanding despite the obvious pain. Not a request. An order. Every rational cell in my body told me to run, to call the police, to do anything except what I did next, but there was something in his eyes, not pleading exactly, but a kind of desperate calculation. And I'd spent 23 years learning to read people, to survive on instinct when logic failed. I eased him into the booth, his weight settling with a suppressed groan, and crossed to the door. My hands shook as I turned the lock, flipped the sign to closed, and pulled down the shade. The click of the deadbolt felt like sealing my own fate. "There's a first aid kit in the back," I said, already moving. "Don't die in the next 30 seconds. A sound escaped him. Was that a laugh? "I'll try." The kit was pathetically inadequate for whatever had happened to him. Band-aids and antiseptic wipes weren't going to cut it. I grabbed clean dish towels instead, my mind racing. This was insane. This was beyond insane. but my hands were already moving with purpose, gathering supplies, filling a bowl with warm water. When I returned, he'd shrugged out of his jacket, revealing the full extent of the damage. The white shirt was ruined, a tear in the fabric near his ribs showing a deep gash that still wept blood. Not spurting, no arterial damage, thank God, but bad enough. I need to see it, I said, setting everything on the table. He looked at me for a long moment, those dark eyes searching for something. Then, with movements that spoke of considerable pain, he began unbuttoning his shirt. I'd seen shirtless men before. This was different. His torso was a canvas of violence and survival, old scars crisscrossed with new wounds, each telling a story I probably didn't want to know. The fresh cut was maybe 4 inches long, deep enough to need stitches, but, miraculously, not deep enough to have hit anything vital. What happened? I asked, soaking a towel in warm water, my voice steadier than I felt. Business disagreement. Must have been some disagreement. His jaw tightened as I pressed the wet cloth to the wound, cleaning away the blood. You could say that. I worked in silence for a moment, hyper-aware of his eyes on me, of the rise and fall of his chest, of the coiled tension in his body even in injury. He didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, even when I applied pressure to staunch the bleeding. You should go to a hospital, I said. Can't or won't. Both. I met his gaze. Are you in trouble with the law? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Something like that. Should I be worried? Probably. The honesty was startling. I should have been terrified. I should have kicked him out, called the cops, protected myself. Instead, I found myself pressing a clean towel against his wound, my fingers gentle despite the situation. What's your name? He asked suddenly. Emma. I didn't know why I told him the truth. Emma Chen. Emma. He said it slowly, like tasting wine. Don't, I cut him off. I don't want to know. Because knowing made it real. Knowing made me complicit. Knowing meant I couldn't pretend this was just a Good Samaritan moment. That tomorrow I'd wake up, and this would be a strange dream fueled by exhaustion and too much coffee. He studied me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Smart girl. Not that smart, apparently. I secured the makeshift bandage with medical tape, my hands surprisingly steady. I'm helping a bleeding stranger instead of running. Why are you helping me? I sat back, really looking at him. Even injured, even vulnerable, there was something magnetic about him, a gravity that pulled despite all warning signs. Power, barely contained. Danger, barely leashed. I don't know, I admitted. Stupid, probably. Brave. I laughed, but it came out shaky. There's a difference? The bell above the door rattled violently, making me jump. Someone was trying to get in, twisting the handle with increasing aggression. Through the shade, I could see shadows, multiple figures, broad-shouldered, moving with purpose. The man in the booth went rigid, his hand moving to his waistband, where I suddenly noticed the outline of a gun beneath his shirt. His entire demeanor changed in an instant, from wounded to lethal, like watching a switch flip. Get down, he ordered, voice low and hard. Who? Emma, get down. The way he said my name, urgent, protective, absolute, made me obey without thinking. I slid from the booth, crouching low as my heart hammered against my ribs. More rattling at the door, then voices, muffled but aggressive. We know you're in there, boss. Oh, God. This man I'd just bandaged, whose blood was still on my hands, looked down at me with something unreadable in his dark eyes. Not quite regret, not quite apology. Something heavier. I'm sorry, he said quietly. You shouldn't have locked that door. The window beside the door exploded inward with a crash of shattering glass, and I realized with crystalline clarity that my life had just changed forever, that whatever happened next, there was no going back to who I'd been 30 minutes ago. Just Emma Chen, invisible waitress in a forgotten bistro, trying to survive another shift. The man pulled the gun from his waistband with practiced ease, his eyes never leaving mine. Stay behind me, he commanded. And Emma? Yes? No matter what happens next, you defended me tonight. I don't forget that. The glass continued to rain down in glittering shards, catching the fluorescent light like falling stars. My mind couldn't process what was happening. The casual way he held that gun, the cold calculation in his eyes as he assessed angles and distances. The fact that men were breaking into Romano's bistro like it was some kind of action movie, and I was somehow trapped in the middle of it. "Boss, we're coming in." The voice from outside was familiar somehow, carrying an edge of desperation that made my skin crawl. "We can explain. Stay where you are, Dante." The man's voice had transformed completely, no longer rough with pain, but sharp with authority, each word a blade. "You have 3 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't put a bullet in you the moment you step through that door." I was still crouched beside the booth, my knees pressed against the cold linoleum, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like me. I served pasta and cleared tables and went home to a studio apartment with a broken heater. I didn't get caught in the crossfire of, what, gang violence? Mafia business? The word boss kept echoing in my head. A figure appeared in the broken window frame, hands raised, silhouetted against the rain-soaked street. It was Marco's idea. He said, he told us you'd ordered the hit yourself, that you wanted to consolidate, that Marco. The name came out like poison. The man, the boss, shifted slightly, and I saw his jaw clench, a muscle jumping beneath the stubbled skin. My own cousin. We didn't know, boss. I swear on my mother's grave, we didn't know it was a setup until you'd already left me bleeding in an alley. His voice was terrifyingly calm now, the kind of calm that preceded hurricanes, until you'd already driven away, until you'd already chosen Marco's lies over 10 years of loyalty. I watched, frozen, as 3 men climbed through the window one by one, glass crunching beneath their expensive shoes. They were all cut from the same cloth. Dark suits, harder eyes, the kind of build that came from gym memberships and violence in equal measure. But there was something desperate in their movements, in the way they kept their hands visible, in how they positioned themselves like supplicants before a king. "Mr. Salvatore, please." The one called Dante stepped forward, and I saw he was younger than the others, maybe late 20s, with a scar running through his left eyebrow. "We came back. As soon as we realized, we came back for you, Salvatore." The name struck me like a physical blow. Even I, invisible Emma Chen, who read romance novels on her breaks and dreamed of saving enough money to finish nursing school, even I had heard whispers of the Salvatore family. They owned half the city, controlled the docks, ran everything from high-end restaurants to God knew what else in the shadows. And I'd just bandaged the head of the family in a failing bistro at midnight. "You came back," Salvatore repeated, his tone suggesting he was testing the words for truth. How noble. And where exactly did you think I'd be? Still bleeding in that alley where you left me? "We checked there first, boss, and the safe houses. And..." Dante's eyes finally landed on me, still crouched beside the booth like a frightened rabbit. His expression shifted, confusion mixing with something sharper. "Who's she?" The change in Salvatore was instant. He moved. Despite his injury, despite the blood I could see seeping through my makeshift bandage, positioning himself between me and his men with a fluidity that spoke of years of combat training. The gun never wavered. "She," he said, his voice dropping to something dangerous, "is none of your concern. Boss, we need to get you medical attention. Real medical attention." Another man spoke up, older, with silver threading through his dark hair. "Let us take you to Dr. Russo. After you abandoned me," Salvatore's laugh was brittle, "after you believed Marco's poison without even a phone call to verify? Tell me, Vicente, why should I trust any of you with my life now?" Vicente's face paled. "We made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But we're here now, and you're hurt, and this..." He gestured at the bistro, at me. "This isn't secure." He's right about that. The third man, built like a tank with knuckles that looked like they'd met many faces, stepped forward. "Boss, we're exposed here. If Marco sent us to kill you, he'll send others. We need to move." I felt Salvatore's body tense, felt the weight of impossible decisions pressing down on him. He was outnumbered, injured, and despite the gun in his hand, I could sense his vulnerability. These men could overpower him if they chose. The fact that they hadn't, that they stood there pleading instead of attacking, seemed to matter. Emma. My name, spoken quietly, made me jump. Stand up. Slowly. I obeyed, my legs shaking as I rose. Every eye in the room fixed on me, and I felt stripped bare under their scrutiny. What did they see? A nobody. A witness, a complication, a liability. She stays out of this, Salvatore said, still not looking at me, but somehow communicating absolute protection in those 4 words. Whatever happens next, she walks away clean. Understood? Boss, Dante started. I said, understood? The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Understood, they chorused, but I saw the looks they exchanged. Doubt, concern, calculation. Salvatore finally turned to me, and the transformation in his face was startling. The hardness softened just slightly, just enough to show the man beneath the armor. You need to go. Now. Walk out the back door, go home. Forget this ever happened. You're still bleeding, I heard myself say, which was possibly the stupidest thing I could have focused on given the circumstances. That wound needs proper stitches, antibiotics, monitoring for infection. I'll survive. You might not. The words came out stronger than I felt. I've seen enough kitchen accidents to know that needs real medical care. If it gets infected... She's right, boss. Vicente again, his tone careful. Dr. Russo can be here in 20 minutes. Salvatore's eyes never left mine. Why do you care? It was a fair question. Why did I care? This man was clearly dangerous, clearly involved in things that should send me running. His own men had tried to kill him. He held a gun like it was an extension of his body. Everything about this situation screamed danger. But I'd seen something in that first moment when he'd stumbled through the door. Beneath the expensive suit and the obvious power, I'd seen someone vulnerable, someone betrayed, someone human. And I'd spent my whole life being invisible, being ignored, being the person people looked through rather than at. Maybe that's why I recognized the flash of genuine surprise when I'd chosen to help instead of hide. I don't know, I admitted. But I do. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or curiosity. He studied me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. This small Asian woman with calloused hands and a cheap uniform who'd somehow inserted herself into his world of violence and betrayal. Boss, we really need to go. The tank-like man moved toward the door. Every second we stay here, the sound of screeching tires cut him off. Through the broken window, I saw 2 black SUVs pull up, blocking both ends of the street. Car doors opened, and men emerged, more than before, armed with more than fists and desperation. Shit. Dante moved to the window, peering out. That's Marco's crew. He must have been watching us. Salvatore's entire body went rigid. I saw him calculating odds, assessing options, all while blood continued to seep through his shirt. The situation was impossible. He was injured, outnumbered, trapped in a bistro with a broken window and only one back exit. And I was standing in the middle of it all. The back, Vicente urged. We can get to the cars. They'll have covered it. Salvatore's voice was grim. Marco's not stupid. He'll have men in the alley. Then we fight. The tank cracked his knuckles. We're outgunned, Tony. Dante's voice carried an edge of panic. And the boss is hurt. We can't... The basement. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. All eyes turned to me. There's a basement. It connects to the old speakeasy tunnel from Prohibition. Comes out 3 blocks away in what used to be a hotel. Salvatore's eyebrows rose. You're certain? Marco showed me once when he was drunk, bragging about the building's history. I moved toward the kitchen, knowing they'd either follow or they wouldn't. It's cramped and probably full of rats, but it's a way out. I heard Salvatore give orders. Sharp, concise, military precise. Dante to watch the front, Tony to check the alley, Vicente to secure their vehicles for pickup at the tunnel exit. The sound of their movement filled the bistro. Organized chaos directed by a man who commanded even while wounded, then footsteps behind me. I didn't need to turn to know it was him. You're helping me again, Salvatore observed, as I led him through the kitchen to the storage room. Why? I pulled open the door to reveal stairs descending into darkness. The smell of mold and old stone wafted up. Maybe I'm an idiot. Or maybe you're the only person in this entire city who's shown me genuine kindness in years. His voice was close, too close, his breath warm against my ear. Which makes you either very brave or very foolish. Can't it be both? I felt rather than saw his smile. Yes, it can be both. The sound of gunfire erupted outside. Sharp cracks that made me flinch. Salvatore's hand found my arm, steadying me, and I felt the strength in his grip despite his injury. Emma. My name again, and this time it carried weight, significance, promise and threat intertwined. When this is over, I'm going to owe you a debt. Do you understand what that means? I understood enough to know my life had just become infinitely more complicated. The stairs beckoned, darkness and uncertainty waiting below. Behind us, more gunfire, shouting, the sound of windows shattering. Ahead, a tunnel that might lead to safety, or might lead somewhere worse. Salvatore was looking at me with those impossibly dark eyes, waiting for my answer, and I realized he was giving me one final chance to walk away. To claim ignorance, to let him and his men disappear into that basement alone, to go back to being invisible Emma who served pasta and dreamed small dreams. But I'd already locked the door, I'd already cleaned his wounds, I'd already defended him when I could have run. I understand, I whispered, and started down the stairs. His hand never left my arm as we descended into the darkness together, and I heard him murmur something in Italian. A prayer, maybe, or a curse. Behind us, Dante, Tony, and Vicente followed, their footsteps heavy on the old wood. The basement swallowed us whole, and somewhere in the distance, I heard Marco's men breaking through Romano's front door. The tunnel was worse than I remembered, narrower, damper, the walls slick with moisture that might have been condensation or might have been something far less pleasant. My phone's flashlight cut a weak beam through the oppressive darkness, illuminating rough stone walls and a floor littered with debris from decades of abandonment. The air was thick, stale, tasting of earth and decay. Salvatore stayed close behind me, his breathing labored but controlled. I could hear the others further back, Vicente's muttered complaints about the tight space, Tony's heavy footfalls, Dante's whispered updates into his phone, coordinating their escape. How much further? Salvatore's voice was tight with pain he was clearly trying to hide. Maybe 500 feet. I ducked under a low-hanging pipe, feeling cobwebs catch in my hair. The exit is in the old hotel's basement. It's abandoned now, condemned for asbestos or something, but my foot caught on something and I stumbled. Salvatore's hand shot out, catching me around the waist, pulling me back against his chest. For a moment we stood frozen, his arm iron hard across my ribs, his heartbeat thundering against my shoulder blade. I could feel the wetness of blood seeping through his shirt, warm against my back. Careful, he murmured, his lips close to my ear, and something in his tone made my skin prickle with awareness that had nothing to do with fear. Sorry, I breathed, steadying myself. The floor's uneven. He released me slowly, and I immediately felt colder. Ridiculous. I was leading a Mafia boss through a forbidden tunnel while his enemies hunted him, and I was noticing how warm his body felt, how his cologne still managed to cut through the musty air. I was definitely losing my mind. We moved forward in tense silence, the sounds of pursuit distant but persistent, voices echoing through the basement we'd left behind, flashlight beams sweeping. They'd found the tunnel entrance. It was only a matter of time. Faster, Vicente urged from behind. They're coming. The tunnel began to slope upward, and I knew we were getting close. My calves burned with the incline, my uniform soaked with sweat, and God knew what else from brushing against the walls. Salvatore's breathing had become ragged, each intake sharp with pain. Boss needs to stop, Tony said suddenly. He's bleeding worse. I'm fine, Salvatore bit out, but when I glanced back, even in the weak light, I could see fresh blood darkening his shirt, my makeshift bandage completely saturated. You're not fine. I stopped, forcing the whole procession to halt. You need pressure on that wound or you'll bleed out before we even get to safety. We don't have time. Make time. I turned to face him fully, and even in the darkness I could see the pallor of his skin, the slight tremor in his hands. Sit. Now. For a moment I thought he'd argue. This was a man accustomed to giving orders, not taking them, especially not from someone like me, but something in my tone. Maybe it was the nurse I hoped to become someday. The caretaker instinct that had been buried under years of just surviving made him comply. He sank against the tunnel wall with a suppressed groan, and I knelt beside him, my hands already working. The bandage was ruined, the wound weeping steadily. I needed something clean, something... I didn't hesitate. My uniform shirt came off before I could overthink it, leaving me in just my thin undershirt, the cold air raising goosebumps on my arms. I heard one of the men shift uncomfortably, but Salvatore's eyes stayed locked on my face as I folded the shirt into a thick pad. "This is going to hurt," I warned. "It already hurts." I pressed the fabric against his wound, hard, and felt his entire body go rigid. A sound escaped him. Low, guttural, quickly bitten back. His hand found my wrist, gripping tight enough to bruise, but I didn't let up on the pressure. "Breathe," I instructed, holding firm despite his grip. "Count to 10. 1, he gritted out. 2, 3. "Emma, they're coming." The voices in the tunnel were closer now, echoing off stone. Flashlight beams danced in the distance. We had maybe 2 minutes, probably less. "Vicente, take point," Salvatore ordered, even while I held pressure on his wound. "Tony, cover our rear. Dante, get the cars ready at the exit." They moved without question, Dante jogging ahead while the other two took defensive positions. I heard the distinctive sound of guns being chambered, and the reality of the situation crashed over me again. This was real. People might die in this tunnel. I might die in this tunnel. "Emma." Salvatore's voice pulled my attention back. His free hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing my cheek. "When we get out of here, you run. You understand? You run, and you don't look back. You need medical attention. I'll get it. But you disappear. Change your name, leave the city, whatever it takes." His eyes were intense, burning with something I couldn't quite name. "Forget you ever met me." "Why?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "Because I won't be the reason you get hurt." His thumb traced my jawline, the gesture surprisingly gentle from a man who'd held a gun minutes earlier. "Because you defended me when you had no reason to, and that means something. It means I protect you now, even if it's from myself." Shouts erupted from deeper in the tunnel. Marco's men had spotted Vicente. The sharp crack of gunfire made me flinch, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. "We need to move," Vicente called out, already firing back. Salvatore was on his feet instantly, pulling me up with him, the moment of vulnerability gone as the armor snapped back into place. We ran, him favoring his side, me trying not to trip in the darkness, both of us propelled by adrenaline and survival instinct. The tunnel seemed endless, each step echoing, each breath burning in my lungs. More gunfire behind us, closer now. Tony was shooting back, buying us time, but I could hear the urgency in Vicente's commands, the desperation. Then, light, real light. Not just phone flashlights, but the gray pre-dawn glow filtering through a gap ahead, the exit. Dante was there, holding open a rusted metal door that opened into what had once been the hotel's boiler room. Black SUVs idled in the alley beyond, engines running, ready for escape. "Go!" Tony shouted from behind us. "We'll hold them!" Salvatore hesitated for just a fraction of a second, torn between escape and leaving his men. Then his training took over, a leader's decision, cold and calculated. He pulled me through the door, into the boiler room, toward the waiting vehicles. But I yanked my arm free, stopping short. "We can't just leave them. They know what they signed up for." His voice was hard, but I saw the cost in his eyes. I didn't. The words hung between us. I didn't sign up for any of this, but I'm here, and I'm not going to watch people die because... The decision was made for us. Vicente and Tony burst through the door, firing behind them, and Dante slammed it shut, immediately dragging a heavy filing cabinet to block it. It wouldn't hold long. Already I could hear bodies hitting the other side, voices shouting, the metallic scrape of the handle turning. "Move!" Vicente grabbed my arm, less gentle than Salvatore, and suddenly I was being hauled toward the SUVs, my feet barely touching the ground. The back door of the lead vehicle flew open. Salvatore was already being pushed inside by Tony, blood still seeping through his shirt. Vicente literally lifted me off my feet and deposited me in the seat next to him, then jumped into the front passenger seat as Dante slid behind the wheel. The second SUV roared to life behind us, Tony jumping into it with two other men I hadn't seen before. Backup, I realized, called in during our tunnel escape. "Drive," Salvatore commanded, and Dante didn't need to be told twice. We peeled out of the alley just as Marco's men burst from the hotel's side entrance, guns raised. Bullets pinged off the reinforced metal of the SUV. Bulletproof, I realized with a sick lurch, as we fishtailed onto the main street. I was thrown against Salvatore as Dante took a corner at speed, and his arm came around me automatically, holding me steady. I could feel his heart racing against my cheek, could smell blood and expensive cologne and the acrid scent of adrenaline. "Status?" he asked Vicente, his voice remarkably steady for a man who'd been shot and nearly killed twice in one night. "They're following but losing ground. Dante's the best driver we have." Vicente was on his phone, speaking rapid Italian. "Dr. Russo is standing by at the penthouse. ETA 7 minutes. The penthouse isn't secure," Salvatore said. "Marco knows all my properties." "Then where?" Dante's eyes met his boss's in the rearview mirror. Salvatore was quiet for a moment, his arm still around me, his thumb absently tracing patterns on my shoulder through my thin undershirt. I realized I was still in just that undershirt and my work pants, my uniform shirt still pressed against his wound under his ruined dress shirt. "The Rothwell estate," he said finally. "The one I won in the poker game from Senator Rothwell. Marco doesn't know about it. I haven't told anyone. That's because it's 2 hours outside the city," Vicente protested. "Boss, you need medical attention now." "Then Dr. Russo meets us there." The tone brooked no argument. "Make the call." Vicente muttered something in Italian that sounded like cursing, but complied, speaking rapidly into his phone. I felt Salvatore shift, looking down at me in his arms, and found him studying my face with that same intense scrutiny from the bistro. "You're still here," he observed quietly, so only I could hear under the sounds of the vehicle and Vicente's phone call. "You didn't exactly give me a choice." "I gave you several." His hand moved from my shoulder to my face again, that same gentle touch that seemed so at odds with everything else about him. "You just didn't take them. Maybe I'm stubborn. Maybe you're exactly what I needed tonight." The words were soft, almost vulnerable, the armor cracking just slightly, a stranger with no agenda, no betrayal in her heart, just kindness. I didn't know what to say to that. My mind was still trying to process the last hour, the tunnel, the gunfire, the fact that I was currently pressed against a bleeding Mafia boss in a bulletproof SUV racing through the city at dawn, while his cousin tried to have him killed. This was not how I'd expected my Thursday shift to end. "Emma." He tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet his eyes. "I meant what I said. When we get to safety, you disappear. I'll give you money, new identity, whatever you need. But you cannot be connected to me. Do you understand? People I care about don't survive long in my world. I don't want your money." His eyebrows rose. "Everyone wants money. I want..." What did I want? To finish nursing school? To pay off my student loans? To stop living paycheck to paycheck in a studio with a broken heater? Small dreams. Insignificant dreams. But looking into his dark eyes, feeling his heartbeat against my palm where my hand had somehow come to rest on his chest, I realized those dreams felt impossibly far away now. "I want to make sure you don't die from an infected stab wound because you're too stubborn to get proper medical care." Something flickered across his face. Surprise. Warmth. Something deeper I couldn't name. "You barely know me. I know you said please when you were bleeding to death. I know you protected me from your own men. I know..." I hesitated, not sure I should say this, but saying it anyway. "I know that when your cousin betrayed you and your men abandoned you, you stumbled into my bistro and trusted me when you had no reason to. Trust." He tested the word like it was foreign. "I'm not sure I remember what that feels like." "Then maybe," I said softly, "it's time you learned again." The SUV slowed as we merged onto the highway heading out of the city, the second vehicle staying close behind. The sun was rising now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, beautiful and indifferent to the violence and chaos of the night we'd survived. Salvatore held my gaze for a long moment, something shifting in his expression, a decision being made, a line being crossed. Then he pulled me closer, resting his forehead against mine, his breath warm on my lips. "You're going to ruin me, Emma Chen," he whispered. "I can already tell. And despite everything, the danger, the blood, the impossibility of this entire situation, I felt myself smile. "Good," I whispered back. The Rothwell estate materialized out of the early morning mist like something from a Gothic novel, all stone and iron gates, sprawling grounds that spoke of old money and older secrets. The SUVs crunched up a gravel driveway, lined with ancient oaks, their branches forming a canopy that filtered the sunrise into dancing shadows. I'd fallen into an exhausted half-sleep against Salvatore's chest during the drive, lulled by the rhythm of his heartbeat and the hum of the engine. His arm had remained around me the entire time, a warm, solid presence that should have terrified me, but instead felt oddly safe. When Dante finally cut the engine, I jerked awake, disoriented and stiff. "We're here," Salvatore murmured, his voice rough with pain and fatigue. "Welcome to the middle of nowhere." The estate was enormous, a 3-story manor house with wings stretching in both directions, windows dark and unwelcoming. It looked abandoned, which I supposed was the point, a perfect hiding place. Dr. Russo was already there, a silver-haired man in his 60s with steady hands and sharp eyes that took in Salvatore's condition with one sweeping glance. He'd set up a makeshift medical station in what had once been a grand parlor, now covered in dust sheets and smelling of disuse. "Cristo," he muttered in Italian, helping Salvatore onto a cleared settee. "What did they use? A hunting knife?" "Something like that." Salvatore's jaw was tight, his face pale beneath stubble and dried blood. He'd barely made it out of the SUV, leaning heavily on Tony and Vicente. I hovered near the doorway, suddenly feeling like an intruder. This was his world. These men who spoke in Italian and moved with military precision. This doctor who clearly knew not to ask too many questions. This estate hidden away from everything I'd ever known. "Miss," Dr. Russo's accented voice pulled my attention. "You're the one who did the initial bandaging?" Yes, just towels and tape. Nothing proper." "You may have saved his life." He gestured me forward. "Come. I'll need assistance." The next hour passed in a blur of medical procedure that would have fascinated nursing student Emma if she wasn't so exhausted and traumatized. Dr. Russo worked efficiently, cleaning the wound properly, stitching it closed with neat, practiced movements while Salvatore stared at the ceiling with jaw clenched, refusing pain medication beyond a local anesthetic. "I need to stay alert," he'd said when the doctor offered morphine. "Until I know Marco's next move." I held instruments when Dr. Russo needed them, applied pressure where he directed, tried not to think about how intimate this was. My hands on Salvatore's skin, cleaning blood from the ridges of his abdomen, feeling the tension in his muscles as the needle pierced flesh. "You have steady hands," Dr. Russo observed, tying off the final suture. "Medical training?" "Some. Pre-nursing courses." I didn't mention that I'd had to drop out when the tuition became impossible, when working double shifts at Romano's barely covered rent. "Waste." He began bandaging the wound properly, layers of gauze and medical tape. "You should finish. Should do a lot of things," I murmured, too tired to filter. Salvatore's hand found mine, squeezing briefly. When I met his eyes, they were dark with something I couldn't read. Gratitude, concern, that same intensity that had marked every interaction since he'd stumbled through the bistro door. "There." Dr. Russo stepped back, surveying his work. 14 stitches. The wound was clean, no signs of organ damage, but you'll need antibiotics and rest. Real rest, Dominic. Dominic. His first name sent a small shock through me. It made him human, real. Not just the boss or Salvatore, but Dominic. A name someone's mother had chosen, had whispered while rocking a baby who would grow up to run a criminal empire. "How long before I can move properly?" Dominic asked, already trying to sit up and wincing at the pull of stitches. 2 weeks minimum. 4 would be better. Dr. Russo began packing his supplies. "And you need to stay still for at least 48 hours. That means bed rest, not running around playing war with your cousin. Marco won't wait 48 hours. Then Marco will be dealing with your corpse." The doctor's tone was sharp. "I'm serious, Dominic. Push this too hard and those stitches will tear, you'll get an infection, and I'll be performing emergency surgery in less sterile conditions than I'd like. Dominic looked like he wanted to argue, but Vicente stepped forward. We've got it covered, boss. Security is setting up perimeter around the estate. Dante's coordinating with our people in the city. Tony's reaching out to the other families, making sure they know Marco acted without your approval. And Marco himself? Gone to ground. But we'll find him. Vicente's expression was grim. He can't hide forever. Family. Dominic's voice was bitter. My own blood. The room fell silent, the weight of betrayal hanging heavy. I found myself moving closer, some instinct telling me he needed... What? Comfort? From me, a stranger who'd known him less than 12 hours. But when my hand touched his shoulder, he didn't pull away. If anything, he leaned into the contact slightly, just enough to acknowledge it. Everyone out, he said suddenly. Except Emma. Dr. Russo raised an eyebrow but complied, gathering his bag. Vicente looked like he wanted to protest, but one look at his boss's face silenced him. Within moments, the parlor had emptied, the door clicking shut behind Tony's broad frame. We were alone. Dominic was still shirtless, his torso now properly bandaged, the evidence of violence both old and new on display. Scars told stories, a puckered bullet wound near his shoulder, what looked like a knife slash across his ribs, burn marks along his left side. This was a body that had survived when it should have died, over and over again. You should go, he said, but made no move to release my hand, which he'd captured at some point. Dr. Russo will arrange transport back to the city. Money, new identity papers. Stop. I squeezed his fingers, feeling calluses I hadn't noticed before. Stop trying to save me from you, Emma. I'm not stupid, Dominic. His name felt strange on my tongue, intimate. I know what you are, what you do. I've lived in this city long enough to hear the stories about the Salvatore family. Then you know why you need to run, maybe. I sat beside him on the settee, careful not to jostle his injury. Or maybe I know that running won't matter. You think Marco won't wonder who bandaged you? Who helped you escape? Those men saw me. They know I exist. His jaw clenched. I'll handle... How? By having them killed to keep me safe. I saw the answer in his eyes before he could speak. That's not protection. That's more blood. And I'm tired of blood. We sat in silence, his thumb tracing absent patterns on my palm. The parlor was heavy with dust and morning light, the sounds of the estate settling around us, men's voices from other rooms, footsteps, the distant sound of vehicles. I don't understand you, Dominic said finally. Everyone wants something from me. Money, power, protection, favors. But you just want to make sure I don't die from an infection. Is that so hard to believe? In my world? Yes. He turned to face me fully, wincing at the movement. People like me don't get kindness without price tags. Then maybe you've been around the wrong people. A sound escaped him, half laugh, half something darker. You have no idea how wrong they've been. His free hand came up to my face again. That gesture that was becoming familiar. His palm warm against my cheek. I should have pulled away. This was insane. He was a criminal. A killer, probably. Definitely dangerous. Everything my rational mind screamed about him should have sent me running. But I'd seen the vulnerability beneath the armor. I'd felt his heartbeat, rapid with fear and pain and very human mortality. I'd watched him protect me from his own men. Had heard him try to send me away to safety, even when I was the only person in hours who'd shown him genuine care. You're going to get hurt, he whispered, his forehead dropping to rest against mine like in the SUV. If you stay in my orbit, something terrible will happen to you. That's not a threat. It's a promise. It's what always happens. Then I guess we'd better make sure you win this war with Marco quickly. His eyes widened slightly. We? You don't think I came this far just to abandon you now, do you? I tried to inject confidence I didn't quite feel into my voice. Besides, you still need someone to make sure you actually rest like the doctor ordered. Emma Chen, are you appointing yourself my nurse? Someone has to. You're clearly terrible at taking care of yourself. This time his laugh was genuine, warm, and I felt it vibrate through his chest where we were still pressed together. You are either the bravest woman I've ever met or the most foolish. I've been told it can be both. His hand slid from my face to the back of my neck, fingers tangling in my hair that had come loose from its ponytail hours ago. The gesture was possessive, claiming, and something in my lower belly tightened in response. If you stay, he said, his voice dropping to something rough and intimate, you stay on my terms. You do what I say when it comes to security. You don't leave the estate without guards. You don't contact anyone from your old life. Dominic, I mean it, Emma. Marco won't hesitate to use you against me if he finds out you matter. His grip tightened slightly, emphasizing his words, and you do matter. You shouldn't, but you do. The confession hung between us, raw and honest. I could feel the warmth of his breath, see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, smell the lingering scent of his cologne beneath antiseptic and blood. Okay, I whispered. Your terms. Something fierce flashed across his face. Triumph, possession, relief. Then he was kissing me, his lips claiming mine with an intensity that stole my breath. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and claiming and tasted like violence and salvation in equal measure. I kissed him back without thinking, my hands finding his shoulders, careful to avoid his injury but pulling him closer anyway. He groaned against my mouth, whether from pain or desire I couldn't tell, and deepened the kiss until I was dizzy with it. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were nearly black with want. You're injured, I managed to say, trying to inject sanity into the moment. You should rest. I should. His thumb traced my swollen lower lip. But I've been dying since I walked into your bistro, Emma. Dying from blood loss, from betrayal, from years of living in darkness. And you're the first light I've seen in so long I'd forgotten what it looked like. That's the blood loss talking. No. He kissed me again. Softer this time. That's the truth talking. Maybe the only truth I've told in years. A knock at the door interrupted us. Vicente's voice, carefully neutral. Boss, we have updates on Marco's location. The armor snapped back into place instantly. Dominic's expression hardened, the vulnerability disappearing behind the mask of the man who commanded empires and survived assassination attempts. Come in. Vicente entered, carefully not looking at how close Dominic and I were sitting, at my disheveled state or his boss's obvious interest. Professional to the core. Marco's holed up in the warehouse district. He's reached out to the Marchetti family trying to form an alliance. Claiming you've gone soft, that you're losing control. Dominic's laugh was cold, soft. Because I don't tolerate traitors? He's saying you've been distracted, weak. That the family needs new leadership. Vicente paused. He's calling for a meeting of the commission. Wants to formally challenge your position. The commission. Even I knew what that meant. The ruling council of the 5 families that controlled organized crime in the city. A formal challenge there could mean all-out war. When? Dominic's voice was deadly calm. 3 days. Neutral ground. The old Moretti estate. He's giving me time to either recover or bleed out. Dominic's jaw clenched. Classic Marco. Always playing the odds. We can refuse the meeting. Claim you're dealing with the aftermath of his betrayal. No. Dominic stood, moving stiffly but with determination. We go. We face him in front of the commission, and we end this. Boss, you're barely stitched up. In 3 days you'll still be... I'll be there. The tone brooked no argument. Start preparations. I want full security detail, every ally we have making appearances. And I want dirt on every member of the commission. Leverage, insurance, whatever we can find. Vicente nodded, already moving toward the door. He paused, glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. And her? Dominic's hand found the small of my back, the gesture both protective and possessive. She stays with me. 24-hour protection detail. No one gets close to her without going through me first. Understood. When Vicente left, I turned to Dominic, ready to protest being discussed like property, but the look in his eyes stopped me. Not arrogance. Fear. 3 days isn't enough time to heal, I said quietly. It's the time I have. Then we'll make it work. I took his hand, lacing our fingers together. But right now you're going to lie down, take the pain medication Dr. Russo left, and sleep. Because you're no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion. He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw the internal struggle, the man who never showed weakness warring with the man who was swaying on his feet, held upright by sheer will and adrenaline that was rapidly fading. "Will you stay?" he asked, and the vulnerability in those 3 words nearly broke me. "While I sleep?" "Yes." "Promise me." I stood on my toes, pressing a kiss to his jaw. "I promise." He let me lead him from the parlor, through dusty hallways to a bedroom that had been hastily prepared. Fresh sheets on a massive 4-poster bed, windows overlooking the estate's grounds. I helped him lie down, careful of his stitches, and watched as he finally let go of the control that had kept him moving. Within minutes, he was asleep, his breathing deep and even, one hand still holding mine like an anchor. I settled into a chair beside the bed, exhausted but unable to sleep myself. Through the window, I could see Dominic's men patrolling the grounds, weapons visible, always vigilant. This was my life now, at least for the next 3 days. After that, we faced the commission, and Marco, and whatever came next. But for now, I kept my promise. I stayed. The 3 days before the commission meeting passed in a strange, suspended reality. The Rothwell estate became both sanctuary and prison, safe from Marco's reach but suffocating in its isolation. I watched Dominic heal with the kind of restless energy that made Dr. Russo threatened to sedate him, saw him pace the parlor despite his stitches pulling, heard him on phone calls late into the night, coordinating moves in a chess game I only half understood. But there were other moments too, quiet ones, like the second night, when he found me in the estate's library, surrounded by dust-covered books and moonlight streaming through tall windows. I'd been trying to distract myself from the enormity of everything, from how completely my life had changed in 72 hours. "Can't sleep?" His voice came from the doorway, and I turned to find him barefoot and shirtless except for the bandages, looking more human than I'd yet seen him. Too much in my head. I closed the book I'd been pretending to read. "You should be resting. So should you." He crossed to where I sat, curled in an oversized leather chair, and without asking permission, he lifted me slightly so he could slide in behind me, pulling me back against his chest. The position should have been uncomfortable given his injury, but he arranged us carefully, his arms coming around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. We sat like that for a long time, not speaking, just breathing together while the moon tracked across the sky. His fingers traced idle patterns on my arm, and I felt the steady thrum of his heartbeat against my back. "Tell me about yourself," he murmured eventually. "The real you. Before all this." So I did. I told him about growing up in a tiny apartment above my parents' restaurant, about watching them work themselves to exhaustion, trying to achieve the American dream, about losing them both in a car accident my sophomore year of college, about dropping out to pay for funerals and discovering that dreams cost more than I could afford. "Nursing school was supposed to be my way back," I said quietly. A career, stability, something more than just surviving paycheck to paycheck. But tuition kept rising and I kept falling behind, and eventually Romano's Bistro became my reality instead of my temporary solution. His arms tightened around me. "You'll finish." "Dominic, I mean it." He pressed a kiss to my temple. "When this is over, you'll finish. I'll make sure of it. I don't want your charity. It's not charity. It's..." He paused, searching for words. "It's me trying to give something back to the only person who's ever helped me without wanting something in return." I turned in his arms to face him, careful of his stitches. "What do you want, Dominic? Really?" His hand came up to cup my face. That gesture that had become familiar, grounding. "I want Marco dead. I want my family secure. I want..." His eyes searched mine. "I want you safe. And I want the impossibility of keeping you in my life without destroying you in the process. Maybe I'm stronger than you think. Maybe you are." He kissed me then, slow and deep, tasting like whiskey and something darker. "But I've seen what this world does to good people, Emma. It corrupts or it kills. There's no middle ground. Then we'll find new ground." I kissed him back, pouring conviction I wasn't sure I felt into it. "Together?" The word hung between us. Together. and I saw something shift in his expression. Hope, maybe, or terror. Possibly both. The morning of the commission meeting arrived gray and threatening rain. The estate erupted in controlled chaos. Men in suits checking weapons, SUVs being armored and fueled, Vicente coordinating with an efficiency that spoke of years of practice. Dr. Russo arrived early to check Dominic's stitches, pronouncing him healed enough to move, but warning darkly about torn sutures if he did anything stupid. "When have I ever done anything stupid?" Dominic asked, already shrugging into a bulletproof vest. "Today, apparently," Dr. Russo gestured at me. "You're bringing her?" "She stays where I can see her." No room for argument in that tone. I was dressed in clothes that had appeared in my room, expensive, tailored, nothing like my usual thrift store wardrobe. A simple black dress that somehow made me look sophisticated rather than invisible, shoes that actually fit, a cashmere coat that probably cost more than my monthly rent. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Dominic found me standing there, staring at my reflection, and came up behind me. His hands settled on my shoulders, his eyes meeting mine in the glass. "You look like you belong in my world," he observed. "I don't, though. This is all borrowed. The clothes, the safety, even you." His jaw tightened. "After today, nothing will be borrowed. Marco will be dealt with, one way or another, and then we'll talk about what comes next. What if—" I couldn't finish the thought. "What if you don't survive? What if Marco wins? What if I lose you before I even fully have you?" He turned me to face him, tilting my chin up with gentle fingers. "I've survived worse than Marco. I've survived bullets and betrayals and wars that should have ended me. I'll survive this too." His thumb brushed my lower lip, because now I have something to survive for. The drive to the Moretti estate took 90 minutes, our convoy of 3 SUVs moving through the city with military precision. I sat beside Dominic in the back of the lead vehicle, his hand never leaving mine, his thumb tracing circles on my palm that seemed designed to soothe both of us. The Moretti estate was a sprawling compound on the city's edge, all high walls and security cameras, the kind of place where deals were made and bodies were buried. We were met at the gates by neutral guards, weapons checked and catalogued, everyone searched before entry. Dominic moved through it all with calm authority, but I could feel the tension radiating from him, see it in the set of his shoulders and the careful way he breathed to manage pain from his injury. The commission meeting was held in what had once been a ballroom, ornate and outdated, with 5 long tables arranged in a semicircle. The heads of the 5 families sat with their advisors, decades of power and violence concentrated in one room. The air was thick with cigar smoke and unspoken threats. Marco was already there, sitting at what should have been Dominic's table with a smugness that made my hands clench into fists. He looked nothing like his cousin, shorter, softer, with eyes that held cunning but not strength. When he saw us enter, saw Dominic walking steadily despite his injury, something flickered across his face. Surprise. Fear, quickly masked. "Dominic." The speaker was an elderly man at the center table. Don Moretti himself, mediator of the commission. "We were beginning to wonder if you'd appear." "I'm difficult to kill, Giovanni." Dominic's voice carried across the room, as my cousin has recently discovered. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. This was theater, I realized, watching Dominic command the room with just his presence. Political theater where weakness meant death. "Marco has made serious allegations," Don Moretti continued. "Claims of instability, poor judgment, actions unbecoming of a family head. He's called for a vote of no confidence." "Marco stabbed me and left me to die in an alley." Dominic's words were flat, factual. "Then sent his men to finish the job when I survived. These are the actions of a traitor, not a concerned family member." "You have proof?" This from Don Marchetti, the man Marco had apparently allied with. Vicente stepped forward, placing a tablet on the center table. "Security footage from 6 different cameras showing Marco's men dumping Dominic in that alley. Phone records showing Marco coordinating the attack. Bank records showing payments to the men who abandoned their boss." He paused. "And testimony from those men themselves, who were quite eager to avoid murder charges." Marco's face paled. "They're lying. They were loyal to him. They'll say anything. They're dead, Marco." Dominic's voice was cold as winter. You had them killed yesterday to silence them. But they'd already given statements to my lawyers, notarized and witnessed. Your cleanup crew was 12 hours too late. The room erupted in conversation, sharp Italian, raised voices, fists hitting tables. I stayed close to Dominic's side, feeling horribly out of place but unable to look away from the drama unfolding. This is preposterous. Marco was on his feet now, desperation making him reckless. You're using some patana you picked up to manipulate sympathy, acting wounded when we all know you're weak. You've always been weak. Dominic moved faster than I thought possible given his injury. One moment he was beside me, the next he had Marco by the throat, slamming him against the wall hard enough to crack plaster. The room went deadly silent. Call her that again, Dominic said quietly, his voice carrying lethal promise. And I'll kill you right here. Commission rules be damned. Dominic. Don Moretti's voice cut through the tension. Release him. We settle this properly. For a long moment, I thought Dominic wouldn't comply. I could see the rage in every line of his body, the desire to end this here and now. But slowly, with visible effort, he released Marco's throat and stepped back. Marco slumped against the wall, gasping, his bravado shattered. This isn't over, he wheezed. I challenge you. Traditional rules. Settle this the old way. A challenge. Even I knew what that meant. Single combat, usually to first blood, witnessed by the commission. A way to settle disputes when evidence and politics failed. You're in no condition, Vicente started, but Dominic raised a hand, silencing him. I accept. Boss, your stitches. I accept, Dominic repeated, his eyes never leaving Marco's. Here and now. Let's end this. The ballroom was cleared, furniture pushed back to create an open space. Traditional rules meant no guns, only blades, only skill, only the kind of violence that had settled disputes for generations. Someone produced knives, balanced and deadly, and placed them on a table between the two combatants. I wanted to protest, to stop this insanity, but Vicente's hand on my arm held me back. This is his world, he murmured. His rules. We have to trust him. They faced each other in the center of the room, the commission watching from the perimeter. Dominic moved carefully, testing his range of motion, and I saw him wince as stitches pulled. He was injured, weakened, and Marco knew it. The fight was brutal and brief. Marco lunged first, all desperation and no technique. Dominic sidestepped, his movements economical despite the pain I knew he must be feeling. Steel flashed in the ballroom's chandelier light. Once, twice, a dance of violence that left my heart in my throat. Dominic was toying with him, I realized with sick certainty. Drawing it out, making a point. When he finally struck, it was with surgical precision, a cut across Marco's forearm that sent his knife clattering to the floor, followed by a sweep of legs that put his cousin on his back. Dominic's blade found Marco's throat, pressing just hard enough to draw blood. First blood, Don Moretti intoned. Dominic Salvatore wins. The challenge is satisfied. But Dominic didn't move. He stared down at his cousin, at the man who'd betrayed him, tried to kill him. Challenged everything he'd built. I saw the calculation in his eyes. How easy it would be to press just a little harder. To end this permanently. Dominic. I didn't realize I'd spoken until his eyes found mine across the room. Don't. Something in my voice, my face, my plea reached him through the rage. Slowly, deliberately, he removed the knife from Marco's throat and stood, leaving his cousin bleeding and defeated on the floor. Exile, Dominic said to the commission. Strip him of family name and protection. If he's found within city limits after tonight, his life is forfeit. Agreed, Don Moretti said, and the other family heads nodded. Marco was hauled to his feet by neutral guards, his face a mask of humiliation and impotent fury. As they dragged him toward the exit, he looked back at me with such hatred that I felt it like a physical blow. This isn't over, he spat. She'll pay for making you weak, cousin. She'll... Dominic moved between us, blocking Marco's view of me entirely. Touch her, threaten her, even think about her. An exile will be the least of your concerns, do you understand? Marco's only answer was continued curses, as he was removed from the ballroom. The commission meeting concluded quickly after that. Dominic's position reaffirmed, alliances reshuffled, the balance of power maintained. I watched him navigate it all with the skill of someone who'd been born to this life, and tried to reconcile this man with the one who'd held me in the library and promised to help me finish nursing school. When we finally left, the rain had started, a downpour that matched the release of tension I felt in every muscle. Dominic was quiet during the drive back to the estate, his hand holding mine but his mind clearly elsewhere. "You let him live," I said finally. "I did." "Why?" He was quiet for a long moment, watching rain streak the bulletproof windows. "Because you asked me not to kill him. And because I realized something today. I've spent 15 years becoming exactly what my world demanded. Hard, ruthless, feared. But what has it gotten me? Betrayal, isolation, men who follow orders but don't give loyalty." He turned to face me, his dark eyes intense. "You defended me when I was nothing but a bleeding stranger. You stayed when you should have run. You asked me not to become more of a monster than I already am." His hand came up to cup my face. "Maybe it's time I started listening." "What does that mean?" "It means things are going to change." "I'm going to change." He pressed his forehead to mine, breathing me in. "I can't leave this life entirely. Too many people depend on me. Too many obligations. But I can choose how I live it, who I live it with." My heart was thundering in my chest. "Dominic, move in with me, not the penthouse. Marco was right that I've been predictable. But I have a house, bought under a shell corporation, completely private. It's yours if you want it. Finish your nursing degree. Build the life you should have had." He pulled back enough to meet my eyes. "Let me give you that. Not as payment, not as debt. Because I want to see who you become when you're not just surviving. And what do you get out of it?" A smile touched his lips, the first genuine one I'd seen. "You. In my life, in my home, reminding me that there's more to existence than power and violence. That's everything, Emma. That's more than I ever thought I'd have." I kissed him then, there in the back of the SUV with rain hammering the roof and his men discreetly pretending not to notice. Kissed him with all the fear and relief and impossible hope that had built up over 3 insane days. When we broke apart, I was breathless and shaking. Okay, I'll move in. Okay, I'll finish school. Okay, too. I gestured vaguely at everything. All of this insanity. His laugh was warm, genuine, the sound of a man who'd been given an unexpected gift. "You're going to ruin me, Emma Chen. I know." I settled against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath my palm. "But you're going to let me anyway." "Yes," he murmured against my hair. "I am." 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of the house Dominic had given me, airy and modern, with windows overlooking a private garden, making coffee before my early class. Clinical rotation started next week, the final step before graduation. My nursing degree, once an impossible dream, was finally within reach. Dominic emerged from the bedroom, dressed for whatever business required his attention today, and wrapped his arms around me from behind. The scar from Marco's knife had healed to a thin white line, barely visible. We'd heard nothing from his cousin since the exile. Rumor had it he'd fled to Europe, nursing his grudges in obscurity. "You're going to be late," I murmured, leaning back into his embrace. "Let them wait." He pressed a kiss to my neck. "I have something more important right here." I turned in his arms, finding him watching me with that same intensity from the first night, but softer now. Warmed by 6 months of learning each other, of building something neither of us had expected. "Who would have thought," I said, tracing the line of his jaw, "that defending a bleeding stranger would lead here? Best decision you ever made." "Second best." I kissed him softly. The best was staying. His arms tightened around me, and I felt the truth of it settle into my bones. My life had changed that Thursday night at Romano's Bistro when I'd chosen compassion over caution, when I'd locked the door and cleaned a stranger's wounds. I'd defended him, and in doing so, I'd found something I hadn't even known I was looking for. Not just love, but partnership. Not just safety, but home. "I love you," Dominic said quietly, the words still new enough to make my heart skip. "I love you too." I pulled him closer, breathing in his familiar scent. My beautiful disaster. He laughed, the sound warm and free, and I knew that whatever came next, whatever challenges his world or mine threw at us, we'd face it together. The waitress who saved the Mafia boss who learned to be saved. Our story was just beginning.